She kissed him like it was the last mercy she'd ever give, and the first bullet she'd ever load with her own hands. The sun didn't set over Redemption Creek. It bled. A slow, thick smear of crimson across the western ridge, staining the dust, the rooftops, the faces of men who'd long forgotten what clean light felt like. Silas stood at the edge of town, his shadow long and thin behind him, like a noose waiting to be tied. His boots were cracked with alkali, his coat frayed at the cuffs, and his eyes, those cold, quiet eyes, held the kind of stillness that only comes after you've buried too much of yourself to count. He hadn't come for whiskey, hadn't come for women or cards or even a warm bed. He'd come because the wind had whispered a name in his ear last night, curled up under a mesquite tree with nothing but stars and ghosts for company. That name was Elias Crow, and Elias Crow was dead, killed by Silas's own hand last winter in a snow-choked pass where mercy froze before it could be spoken. But Elias left something behind, a widow, and she was waiting. She found him before he found the saloon, before he could steady his nerves with rot gut and smoke. She stepped out from the shadow of the dry goods store like she'd been stitched into the dusk itself, quiet, deliberate, wearing a dress the color of dried sage and eyes that didn't blink when they met his. No fear, no foodie, just a quiet, coiled thing like a rattler before the strike. Her hair was pulled back tight, not for vanity, but for survival. Dust clung to her collarbone. Her knuckles were raw, like she'd scrubbed something clean that didn't want to be. She didn't speak. I didn't need to. The way she walked toward him, slow, barefoot on the warped boardwalk, each step measured like a heartbeat counting down, told him everything. This wasn't a chance. This was reckoning. He didn't reach for his gun, didn't shift his weight, just stood there, letting the desert wind tug at his coat, letting the silence between them grow teeth. Then she kissed him. Not soft, not sweet, not the kind of kiss you give a man you love. This was the kind of kiss you give a man you're sending to hell, with your lips as the gate. She pressed into him suddenly and sure, one hand sliding up to grip the back of his neck, the other fisted in the fabric over his heart. Her mouth was warm, dry, tasted like salt and something bitter, grief, maybe, or the last dregs of courage. He didn't pull away, couldn't. It wasn't desire that rooted him there. It was a shock. It was the weight of her silence, the way her body trembled, not with fear, but with fury held so tight it vibrated like a bowstring. He felt the locket then, cold metal pressed between them, tucked just beneath her collar. He didn't know what it was, didn't know whose face was inside. All he knew was the way her breath hitched when she finally pulled back. Not gasping, not crying, just empty, like she poured everything she had into that one act. And now there was nothing left but dust and the echo of what she'd done. She didn't say a word, just turned, walked back into the shadows of the store, left him standing there with the taste of her on his lips and the ghost of her fingers still burning on his skin. He touched his mouth. I looked down at his glove, saw the faint smudge of red, not blood. Paint? Lip stain? No, ruched. From the locket. He didn't understand. Not yet. But the town did. Windows creaked shut. Porch chairs scraped back. A dog whined and slunk under a wagon. Even the flies seemed to pause. Silas turned slowly, scanning the street. Saw faces in doorways. Hats pulled low. Hands resting too close to holsters. 10 men. He counted them without counting. Knew their stances. Knew the way their shoulders hunched. Not with fear, but with purpose. They weren't here for showdown. They were here for an execution. And the widow? She just signed his death warrant with her mouth. He walked to the saloon, pushed through the swinging doors. The air inside was thick with smoke and sweat and the sour tang of spilled beer. No one spoke. No one looked at him. The piano player stopped mid-chord. The bartender froze, bottle in hand. Silas walked to the bar, slid onto a stool. Didn't ask for a drink. Just sat there, staring at his reflection in the warped mirror behind the counter. Saw the kiss still clinging to his lips. Saw the rust on his glove. Saw the 10 shadows gathering outside. He reached into his coat. Felt the weight of his Colt. Felt the empty chambers where 6 bullets waited. He had 4 more in his pocket. 10 shots. 10 men. Funny math. He smiled. Not because he thought he'd live, but because he finally understood. The widow hadn't kissed him to say goodbye. She'd kissed him to make sure he remembered her when the bullets came. And he would. Oh, he would. Even if it was the last thing he ever did. Outside, a boot scuffed on wood. A match struck. A whisper passed between men who'd known each other since boyhood. Men bound now by vengeance, not blood. Silas closed his eyes, heard the wind moan through the eaves, smelled the coming storm. Not rain, but gunpowder. He thought of the locket, thought of the widow's hollow eyes, thought of Elias Crow, buried under 2 feet of snow and 6 months of silence. He didn't pray, didn't beg, just sat there, letting the saloon's quiet swallow him whole, letting the kiss settle into his bones like a brand. When the first man pushed through the doors, spurs ringing like funeral bells, Silas didn't turn. He just whispered, so low no one but the ghost could hear. "You kissed me like a promise, darling. Now watch me keep it." The door creaked wider. Light bled in. Shadows stretched long across the floorboards. The widow's window upstairs glowed faint, a single candle flickering like a heartbeat. Or a countdown. The sun didn't just climb. It held its breath, waiting to see which man would blink first or bleed last. High noon in Redemption Creek didn't come with fanfare. No trumpets, no church bells, just the slow, suffocating press of heat as the sky turned white and the earth cracked open like old parchment. Silas stepped out of the saloon with his coat unbuttoned, his Colt loose in its holster, and the widow's kiss still burning on his mouth like a brand no whiskey could cool. He didn't swagger, didn't smirk, just walked, slow, deliberate, into the center of the street, where the dust lay thick and undisturbed, save for the boot prints of men who'd already chosen their ground. 10 of them, spread out like vultures circling something already half dead. He counted them without moving his head, saw the glint of rifle barrels propped on shoulders, saw the sweat-darkened collars, saw the way their fingers twitched, not from nerves but from hunger. The hunger to finish what the widow had started. He stopped, 10 paces from the nearest man. Let the silence settle. Let the wind die. Let the whole damn town hold its breath behind shuttered windows and cracked doorframes. This wasn't a duel. This was a slaughter waiting to be blessed by the sun. The first man to speak was Harlan Briggs, Elias Crow's oldest friend, his hunting partner, the man who'd carried his body out of the snow when Silas rode away. Harlan's voice was gravel and rust, scraped raw by years of shouting over campfires and whiskey bottles. "You ain't supposed to be standing, Silas," he said, thumb hooked in his belt, just above the worn leather of his holster. "You're supposed to be begging." Silas didn't answer. Just let his eyes drift past Harlan, past the others, up to the livery loft window where the candle still burned. The widow stood there now, barely visible, just a silhouette behind thin muslin. He couldn't see her face. Didn't need to. He could feel her watching. Could feel the weight of that locket, still tucked in his coat pocket, cold against his ribs. He touched it once. Just once. A silent promise. Or a silent plea. He wasn't sure which. The wind stirred then, just a whisper, and with it came the scent of gun oil, dried sweat, and something else, something sweet. Wild roses, growing stubborn near the churchyard fence. The same kind she'd tucked into Elias's coffin. The same kind she'd probably pressed in his grave before sundown. The second man shifted. A kid, really, couldn't have been more than 19. Jake something. Elias's nephew. Eyes too wide. Hands too shaky. He kept licking his lips like they were bleeding. Silas looked at him. Really looked. Saw the tremor in his trigger finger. Saw the way his breath hitched every time the wind gusted. He wasn't here for vengeance. He was here because someone told him to be. Because family meant blood, even if you didn't understand why it needed spilling. Silas almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then the kid's rifle twitched, just a fraction, and pity turned to ice in Silas's gut. You don't point steel at a man unless you're ready to pull the damn trigger. And this kid? He wasn't ready. But he'd do it anyway. Because the men around him would make sure of it. Because the widow's silence had made cowards into killers. A church bell rang. One slow, hollow note. Not a call to prayer. A call to witness. The men didn't flinch. Didn't look up. Just tightened their stances. Silas exhaled. Slow. Let his hand drift lower. Not to his gun, not yet, but to the buckle of his belt. A distraction. A feint. He saw Harlan's eyes narrow. Saw the kid's breath catch. Saw the fifth man, a brute named Cade with knuckles like river stones, shift his weight forward, eager, hungry. Silas smiled. Not with his mouth. With his eyes. The kind of smile that says, I've seen men like you die screaming. He didn't move fast. Didn't need to. Speed wouldn't save him. Precision would. He dropped his hand to his Colt. Not drawing. Just resting. Letting them see it. Letting them taste the fear they thought he should be feeling. The widow's candle flickered. A shadow passed behind it. Her hand? Her face? He couldn't tell. It didn't matter. She was there. Watching. Waiting. Letting him walk into the fire she'd lit with her lips. Then, the crack. Not from the street. Not from any of the 10. From above. A single shot. Sharp, clean, echoing off the church steeple like God himself had snapped his fingers. It punched through the air between Silas and Harlan, close enough to stir the dust at their boots. Every man in the street flinched. Every rifle jerked skyward. Even Cade, the brute, stumbled back a step, eyes wild. Silas didn't move. Didn't even blink. He knew that shot. I knew the angle. Knew the hand that fired it. The widow. She hadn't aimed to kill. She'd aimed to scatter. To break their line. To give him a chance. Not to run, but to fight on his own terms. He didn't thank her. Didn't look up. Just let his fingers curl around the grip of his Colt. Felt the familiar grooves. Felt the weight of the 6 bullets inside. Heard the creak of leather as the men around him scrambled for cover, shouting, cursing, tripping over their own boots. The kid, Jake, dropped to one knee, rifle clattering in the dirt. Harlan roared something lost to the wind. Cade bellowed like a wounded bull. Silas didn't wait. Didn't hesitate. He moved. Not toward the saloon. Not toward the stables. Toward the locket. Toward the truth. Toward the woman who'd kissed him like a curse and shot like a savior. He ran, low, fast, boots kicking up dust, bullets whining past his ears like angry hornets. One grazed his shoulder. Huh, vet. He didn't stop. Didn't cry out. Just kept moving, hand pressed to his coat pocket, fingers curled around the cold metal inside. The locket. The child's face. The father's eyes. His eyes. Elias hadn't been just a man he killed. He'd been a mirror. And the widow? She hadn't just kissed him goodbye. She'd kissed him awake. The livery doors loomed ahead. The candle still burned above. The widow's shadow still waited. And behind him, 10 shadows, no longer patient. No longer. Now, they were hunting. The bullet didn't kill him. It whispered her name, and that was worse than any wound. Pain didn't come all at once. It came in waves. First the sting, then the burn, then the deep, throbbing ache that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. Silas hit the livery floor hard, shoulder slamming into packed dirt, teeth rattling, vision swimming with dust and blood, and the ghost of gun smoke curling through the rafters. He rolled once, twice, boots scrambling for purchase, fingers clawing at hay and horseshit and broken harness leather. The shot had come from above, clean, precise, meant to scatter, not slaughter, but the ricochet had kissed his left shoulder like a lover with teeth. Blood soaked through his shirt, warm and sticky, but he didn't stop. Couldn't. The 10 men were shouting now, boots pounding the boardwalk, rifles barking wild shots into the air like they were trying to scare the devil out of him. They didn't understand. The devil wasn't coming. The widow was, and she'd already loaded her gun with something heavier than lead. He dragged himself behind a stack of feed sacks, breath ragged, hand pressed to the wound. Not deep, not fatal, but enough to slow him. Enough to make his fingers clumsy as he fumbled for the locket in his coat. The metal was slick with his blood now, warm, trembling in his grip. He pried it open with shaking thumbs. Inside, a tiny drawing. Crude, childish. A stick-figure man with a wide-brimmed hat and a lopsided smile. Beneath it, in careful looping script, Papa. His throat closed. His breath stopped. Elias Crow hadn't just been a man he'd gunned down in the snow. He'd been a father. And the widow? She hadn't just kissed him to mark his death. She'd kissed him to make sure he knew why he deserved it. The livery doors burst open. Sunlight speared through the dust, cutting sharp lines across the floor. Silas didn't move, didn't breathe, just pressed himself deeper into the shadows. Locket clutched to his chest like a holy relic. Boots stomped inside, heavy, impatient. Cade's voice boomed like thunder in a canyon. "He ain't got far. Check the stalls. Rifles cocked. I roost live." A horse whinnied, panicked, hooves clattering against wood. Silas closed his eyes, listened, counted breaths. 3 men inside, maybe 4. The rest were fanning out, checking the alley, the water trough, the back fence. They thought he was running, though he was scared. They didn't know he was already dead. Not from bullets, from guilt, from the weight of that child's drawing pressed against his ribs. He'd killed a father, left a boy without a name to call at night, left a woman to scrub blood from floorboards and pretend she didn't hear the silence where laughter used to live. He opened his eyes, looked up. The widow's window was dark now. The candle is gone, but her shadow? Still there, watching, waiting. He didn't know if she'd fire again. Didn't know if she wanted him alive or just wanted to watch him suffer. All he knew was the taste of her kiss, still on his lips, and the echo of her shot, still ringing in his ears. That bullet hadn't carried gunpowder. It had carried her voice, and it was screaming at him to run. He moved, not toward the back door, not toward the alley, toward the horses. Ghost, the widow's mare, stood in the farthest stall, ears pricked, eyes wide and white-rimmed. She knew him, not as the killer, not as the stranger, as the man who'd knelt in the snow 3 winters ago, coat wrapped around a shivering colt, canteen tipped to its lips while his own throat burned with thirst. She remembered Mercy, and Mercy, it seemed, remembered her. Silas staggered to his feet, biting back a groan as pain lanced through his shoulder. He didn't bother with a saddle, didn't have time, just grabbed a fistful of mane, hauled himself up with a grunt, and swung a leg over her bare back. Ugh. Ghost didn't flinch. I wasn't shy, just stood there, trembling, breath hot against his thigh. Outside, boots scuffed closer. A voice hissed, "Check that stall." Silas leaned forward, pressed his forehead to Ghost's neck, and whispered the only prayer he had left. "Run like hell, girl." She did. Hooves exploded against dirt, wood splintered as Ghost burst through the side gate. Not the main doors, not the obvious escape, but the rotten slats near the water barrel, the one Silas had noticed when he first rode in. The men shouted. Shots rang out, wild, panicked, kicking up dust at their heels. Ghost didn't falter, didn't slow. She ran like the hounds of hell were nipping at her hooves, like the wind itself was begging her to fly. Silas clung to her with one hand, the other pressed to his bleeding shoulder, the locket still burning against his skin. He didn't look back, didn't need to. He could feel them, the 10 shadows, mounting up, spurs ringing, curses sharp as spurs. He could hear the widow, too, not shouting, not screaming, but running, barefoot, gravel crunching under her heels. She was chasing them, chasing him. Why? To finish what she started? To make sure he didn't escape? Or to make sure he didn't die alone? He didn't know. I didn't have time to think. The Ghost veered hard left, pounding toward the canyon pass, the one locals called the Throat because it swallowed men whole and never gave them back. The sun beat down. The wind howled. Blood dripped from his fingers, spattering Ghost's neck like rust-colored rain. Then, her voice. Not in his ears. In his bones. "Don't die clean, Silas." He didn't turn. Couldn't. But he heard it. Clear as a church bell. Clear as the shot that saved him. She wasn't begging him to live. She was begging him to suffer. To carry the weight of what he'd done all the way to the end. To make his death mean something. Even if that something was pain. Ghost crested the ridge. Below them, the canyon yawned wide. Red rock, twisted mesquite, a dry riverbed cracked like old bone. Behind them, the thunder of hooves grew louder. Closer. The 10 men weren't giving up. They were hungry now, furious. Silas tightened his grip on Ghost's mane. Felt the locket dig into his ribs. Saw the child's drawing behind his eyelids every time he blinked. He wasn't running anymore. He was riding toward judgment. And the widow, she was right behind him, barefoot, breathless, and burning brighter than the sun. Ghost didn't run for freedom. She ran for the man who'd once given a starving colt his last sip of water, and now owed the same mercy to himself. The canyon didn't welcome them. It swallowed them. One moment, Silas was clinging to Ghost's back under the white-hot glare of the sun. The next, shadows closed around them like jaws, cool and sudden, smelling of damp stone and ancient dust. Ghost's hooves echoed off the red walls, each thunderous strike bouncing back like a heartbeat counting down. Behind them, the 10 men's shouts grew muffled, distant, swallowed by the narrowing pass, by the wind that howled through the rocks like a chorus of lost souls. Silas didn't look back. Couldn't. His shoulder screamed with every jolt, blood soaking through his sleeve, dripping steady on a Ghost's neck, darkening her coat like ink on parchment. He pressed his forehead to her mane, breathing in the scent of sweat and sage and something deeper, trust. She remembered him. Not the man with the gun. Not the killer. The man who'd knelt in the snow with numb fingers and a cracked canteen, pouring the last of his water into the mouth of a shivering colt while his own lips split from thirst. She remembered mercy, and now she was returning it. Not gently, not slowly, but fiercely, desperately, hooves eating up the cracked earth like she could outrun death itself. He didn't deserve it. He knew that. The locket in his pocket knew that. The child's drawing, creased now, stained with his blood, knew that. But Ghost didn't care about deserving. She cared about debt. And Silas? He owed her everything. The past twisted sharply, a hairpin turn carved by floodwater and time, and Ghost leaned into it like she was born to the canyon's curves. Silas gritted his teeth, muscles screaming as he fought to stay astride, fingers knotted in her mane, legs trembling with exhaustion. His vision blurred, not from blood loss, not yet, but from memory. The snow, the silence. Elias Crow's face, not angry, not afraid, just tired. So damn tired. "You got a boy?" Elias had asked, voice thin as ice, blood pooling black in the snow. Silas hadn't answered, just pulled the trigger. Clean. Quick. Or so he'd thought. Now, with the widow's kiss still burning on his lips and her bullet still ringing in his ears, he knew the truth. There was nothing clean about what he'd done. Nothing quick about the suffering he'd left behind. Ghost leapt over a fallen boulder, landing hard, jarring his shoulder, sending fresh pain lancing through his chest. He gasped, swore, clung tighter. Ahead, the canyon widened. A bowl of cracked earth and skeletal trees, the sky above it bleached pale with heat. No cover, no shelter, just dust and death waiting to be claimed. He urged Ghost faster, not with spurs. He had none, but with whispers. Broken, blood-stained whispers. Just a little farther, girl. Just a little farther. She didn't need the words. She felt his heartbeat, felt his fear, felt the weight of the locket pressed between them. A child's face, a father's ghost, a debt that could only be paid in blood. Behind them, the thunder returned. Not wind, not echo. Hooves. The 10 men had found the turn. Hadn't lost them. Hadn't given up. Silas risked a glance back, just one, and saw them cresting the ridge, silhouetted against the sun, rifles glinting like fangs. Harlan the lead, face twisted with rage. Cade close behind, roaring like a bull. The kid, Jake, bringing up the rear, eyes wide with terror, rifle bouncing uselessly against his saddle. They weren't chasing a man anymore. They were chasing vengeance. And vengeance, Silas knew, never got tired, never got thirsty, never stopped. Ghost's breath came in ragged bursts now, flanks heaving, foam flecking her neck. She was tired. Fussed. Silas's own strength was bleeding out with every heartbeat, his vision tunneling, his grip slipping. He fumbled for the locket again, fingers slick with blood, prying it open one last time. The child's face stared up at him, innocent, unknowing, smiling. "Papa." The word lodged in his throat like a bullet. He hadn't just killed a man. He'd erased a world, a bedtime story, a hand to hold in the dark, a voice to call across a field. He closed the locket, pressed it to his heart, whispered, "I'm sorry." Not to Elias, not to the widow, to the boy, to the ghost he'd made. Then a sound, not from behind, from beside. Hooves, light, fussed, barely there. He turned his head. The widow, riding bareback on a paint gelding, hair flying, dress torn at the hem, face streaked with dust and something wet. Tears? Sweat? He couldn't tell. She didn't shout, didn't scream, just rode, parallel to them, 10 yards off, eyes locked on his, hand outstretched. Not reaching for him, reaching for Ghost, for the reins he didn't have. She was trying to lead them, trying to guide them. Toward what? Safety? A trap? He didn't know. I didn't have time to think. A shot cracked close. Too close. Dirt kicked up at Ghost's heels. The mare screamed, stumbled, and nearly threw him. Silas clung on, heart hammering, eyes locked on the widow. She pointed, sharp, urgent, toward a narrow crevice in the canyon wall, half hidden by a tumble of boulders. An escape? A dead end? He didn't care. He trusted her. Not because she'd kissed him. Not because she'd shot for him. Because she was still here. Still riding. Still fighting. For him. Against him? He didn't know. It didn't matter. He nudged Ghost toward the crevice, whispering, begging, pleading. Go, girl. Go. She obeyed. Leapt. Slipped between the rocks like smoke. The widow followed, swift, silent, vanishing into the shadows just as the 10 men's bullets chewed up the earth where they'd been. Darkness closed around them. Cool. Quiet. Safe? For now. Silas slid from Ghost's back, knees hitting stone, locket still clutched in his fist. The widow dismounted in one fluid motion, bare feet silent on the rock. She didn't speak, didn't touch him, just stood there, breathing hard, eyes gleaming in the dim light, watching him like he was a ghost she wasn't sure was real. Outside, the 10 men reined in, cursing, shouting, searching. Inside, just silence, and the slow, steady drip of Silas's blood onto canyon stone. They didn't bury him with a name, just a wild rose, a locket full of a child's smile, and the echo of her lips pressing forgiveness into his forehead. Dawn came quiet to the canyon, not with fanfare, not with bird song, but with a slow, silver seep of light that crept over the rimrock like a thief stealing shadows. Silas didn't see it. I didn't feel it. He was already gone. Not dead. Not yet, but emptied. Slumped against the sandstone arch where Ghost had carried him, where the widow had pressed a canteen to his lips and whispered, Not here. Not like this. His breath came shallow, slow, each inhale tasting of dust and copper. Blood had dried black on his shirt, crusted thick over the wound his shoulder, his fingers still curled around the locket like it was the only thing tethering him to this world. The widow knelt beside him, silent, her dress torn, her hands raw from digging. Not for escape, not for cover, but for water. She'd found a seep in the rock, barely a trickle, and cupped it in her palms like holy water, pressing it to his cracked lips until he stirred, until his eyes fluttered open, glassy and distant. He didn't speak, didn't thank her, just looked at her, really looked, and saw the years she'd carried since Elias died. The sleepless nights, the hollow mornings, the way her hands shook when she lit the candle each night, waiting for the man who'd killed her peace to walk back into her life. He'd thought she wanted him dead. Maybe she did, but not here. Not like this. Not without him knowing why. She opened the locket, held it to his chest, whispered, His name is Eli. Silas closed his eyes, felt the weight of it. Not just the metal, not just the drawing, but the life he'd stolen. The bedtime stories are never told. The scraped knees never kissed. The fatherless boy growing up in the shadow of a man he'd never know. He nodded. Once. Slow. Then let his head fall back against the stone. Let the silence take him. The 10 men found them at first light. Not by tracking. Not by luck. By surrender. Silas had sent Ghost away. A slap on her rump. A whispered, Go home, girl. And sat up straight, back against the arch, hands empty in his lap. No gun. No fight left. Just a locket. Just a widow. Just a rising sun painting the canyon walls gold. Harlan came first, rifle lowered, face grim. Cade behind him, breathing hard, knuckles white on his reins. The kid, Jake, hung back, eyes red, rifle dangling like he'd forgotten how to hold it. They didn't shoot, didn't shout, just stood there, boots crunching on gravel, watching the man who'd killed their friend, their brother, their uncle, sit waiting for the end like it was a mercy. The widow stood too, slow, deliberate, and stepped between them and Silas, arms spread wide, not in defense, but in declaration. "He knows," she said, voice raw but steady. "He knows what he took, and he's paid." Harlan spat. "Ain't enough." The widow didn't flinch, just held up the locket, opened it, showed them the child's face. "Eli deserves more ghosts," she said. "Let this one rest." Silence. Thick, heavy. The wind stirred. A lizard darted across the stone. Cade shifted his. "Wait." Jake looked away. Harlan stared at the locket, at the drawing, at the name scrawled beneath it. His jaw worked. His eyes glistened. Then he lowered his rifle. "Not all the way. Just enough." "Go on," he muttered. "Get him out of here." The widow didn't move. Didn't thank them. Just turned, knelt beside Silas, and pressed her lips to his forehead. The same slow, sweet pressure as that first kiss in Redemption Creek. Not a curse this time. A blessing. A release. Silas didn't open his eyes. Didn't speak. Just let the warmth of her mouth sink into his skin. Let the scent of her, dust and roses and something like forgiveness, fill his lungs one last time. Then he went still. Not breathing. Not moving. Just gone. They buried him where he sat. No coffin. No preacher. No headstone. Just the widow's hands. Raw. Bleeding. Digging into the red earth until her fingers hit stone. She wrapped him in his coat. Tucked the locket into his palm. Closed his fingers around it. Then she covered him, slow, deliberate, patting the earth smooth with her palms, humming a lullaby Elias used to sing. The 10 men stood back, silent, hats in hand. Even Cade, even Jake. When she finished, she plucked a wild rose from the canyon wall, roots stubborn, petals blood red, and planted it at his head. No name, no dates, just a rose, just the wind, just the silence. Years later, travelers swear they hear hoofbeats at twilight, not running, not fleeing, but riding home. And sometimes, when the wind sighs through the canyon, they swear they hear a woman's whisper, "You carried me into gunfire. I'll carry you out." The rose still grows, roots deep, petals bright, fed by gunpowder, watered by mercy. And every spring, it blooms the exact shade of her lips.